Damn it! My all-time favorite racing game is this one right here, Pole Position 2. Now, if I had to pick a second favorite racing game, honestly, it probably would not be Test Drive Le Mans. However, I will say, and I'm saying this as a huge fan of racing games, as a guy that has played a ton of racing games for 30 plus years, Test Drive Le Mans, surprisingly, might actually round out the top 10. Maybe one of these days I should think about putting together a comprehensive list. But it's up there. This is a quality game that was hugely overlooked, at least in the United States, for an overlooked system, the Sega Dreamcast. The footage we are watching is of the 24 hours of Lemans Race, and I thought this game, being Test Drive Le Mans, the appropriate track to show you guys is the Lemans Race, which is a huge circuit. I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not sure how big the Nürburgring is. I think it's like 5 miles. Fans of Gran Turismo or auto racing in general know what the Nürburgring's in Germany. But the Le Mans track is close to 8.5. There are some seriously long straightaways, as you can see in the little map on the bottom left. But it's like a 2-mile straightaway. You can get some serious speed, and there's a lot of chicanes. This is a tricky track to navigate. And there are other tracks in the game. Suzuka, as you vintage gamers will remember from Pole Position 2. I think that was the first time Suzuka appeared in a video game. And it's appeared in numerous video games since, Gran Turismo, Forza, on and on and on, Test Drive Le Mans. But Suzuka's in here. I can't remember all the names off the top of my head. We'll go over the tracks later. But there's a lot of tracks, everything you normally see in the Le Mans circuit, circa 2000. This game was released in November of 2000. And there's not a lot of games that have this track. The most recent test drive on the PlayStation 3, the most recent Gran Turismo, which I think is 6. I've honestly lost track. 5. I think it's 5. I'm recording this in February of 2017. Whatever one came out in the PS3 a couple years ago. That's the one I'm talking about. Anyways, it wasn't that, and it was called the Circuit des Sarthes or something like that, which is the formal name for the Le Mans track, which I'm sure I butchered a little bit because it's in French. And despite my grandmother being French-Canadian, I don't speak a word. Saw me go off the course a little bit right there, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. You get such speed. I think this car, at least, or the cars at the time, I think got up to about 180, 190. And then all of a sudden you have a sharp right turn, or you have a chicane, which is like an S-curve, and this comes out of nowhere seemingly because you're going straight so fast for so long, and I'm sorry about that ding. People keep emailing me while I'm trying to record. Anyway, but you go so straight for so long, and it's just you can lose your concentration. A stray thought can enter your mind. You're daydreaming, whatever, and boom! Next thing you know, you're in the dirt, you're in the wall, whatever. It is an interesting track to race. Now I'm doing the 3-lap race here, which is one of the options, or I believe there's a 10-lap race, and you can also race the full 24 hours. Not sure how you would do that. There's always the pause button, but generally most of us have to go to school or go to work or eat, pee, whatever. So that is, as I recall, the Cirque de la Sarthe, or Cirque de Sarthe, whatever it was in Gran Turismo. You could race 24 hours there as well, but I don't think anybody did that on A-Spec. I think we all did that on B-Spec. I'll cop to that. This is a race that doesn't get a lot of attention in the United States. I'm based in the U.S., and I believe most of my viewers are, so for you European watchers, I apologize if this sounds extremely elementary, but I want to make sure the majority of my audience understands. There's multiple classes of cars, all running one race. So you could be 12th overall, but first in your class. Like the Porsches we see, those are GT2. And they are nowhere near as fast as these prototypes we're looking at. But you could still win your class even though you're 12th or 20th or 5th or whatever overall. So you really have multiple races going on within one big race. The original Le Mans race, the very first one, I believe, was 1923, 1924, right around there. And what was unique about it at the time, back in the day, back in the early days of motorsport, the whole attraction for manufacturers was to bring a car that could go faster, and whoever had the fastest car, that was a big deal, and that's obviously a key component of racing. But then the idea came along, well, let's not only see who can go fast, but let's see who has endurance. Let's see who has reliability. Let's see who can last. And it's interesting. There's not one driver racing the entire time. They have teams. They have a team of drivers, and somebody goes in for a couple hours. They hop out. Next guy goes in. Third guy goes in. First guy's getting some sleep. Then he goes back in. It's an amazing phenomenon that you have one machine but multiple pilots, multiple drivers, and wouldn't you hate to be the guy that the first two guys ran an awesome race and then you screw it up on your shift 12 hours later? I mean, and that happens. I am told, I did a little research, one driver, I believe back in the 1950s, one driver did drive the entire race. I don't know how he did it. I can stay up for 20 hours, maybe 21, 22, if I got a really good night of sleep the night before, which I don't know how you do before the biggest race of your life, but if I got a really great night of sleep but driving, I don't think I could stay up that long driving. And I'm a guy that travels all over the country for work. I generally drive. I can do 12 hours in a car, no problem. I can get to a little beyond that. I think I've done 15 or 16, and that's really pushing it. I'm slapping myself to stay awake the last hour. I don't know how somebody could drive 24 hours straight in racing conditions, no less. It's amazing. So the date of the Le Mans race, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, it can vary a little bit. It's not like the Indy 500, which is always on Memorial Day weekend. However, it's something you should watch. There's always somebody broadcasting it. Speed Vision, Speed Channel was, I believe it was formerly called, or ESPN. Somebody always has it televised, and they generally show the whole 24 hours. So if you're in the United States and you're into racing, this is something worth checking out. It's really quite the event. I've watched it. I haven't watched the last couple of years, but especially when I was more into following auto racing. My friend Brian and I, Pontiff Games here on YouTube. We watched it several years in a row. So, of course we fell asleep, but it's something you should check out. It's held after the Indy 500, so after Memorial Day here in the U.S., but before the Monaco Grand Prix, which I believe is usually in June, if I'm not mistaken. You Formula One fans, please correct me in the comments if I'm mistaken. You'll notice that we are just about 9 minutes into this video, and I am just now getting to the point where I'm about to complete lap 2. That is how long it takes to get around this place, and I'm moving at a decent click. I'm not breaking any records, but it is just a colossal track, and it's a lot of fun to race. I mean, if you think tracks like Daytona are big, or Indianapolis, and they are. I've been to Indy, and I've been to some other big tracks, and those are very big places. This is just mind-blowing. I've never been to France to see it, but Indy's a 2.5 mile oval. This is 8.5. I can't even quite wrap my head around that. So let's talk about the cars, and I don't want to cut away from any of the action, so we'll have a little picture-in-picture thing going on here with the cars you can select at the start of the game if you're just doing a quick race for, just for fun or whatever. There are more cars you can unlock. And that was the Audi. That's what I'm racing right now. It's a Porsche. The Porsche, you'll notice it's a little hard to read on the picture-in-picture, I'm sure, but it doesn't say Porsche. It has a team name. It'll say Panos or McLaren or something like that. And they do it a little differently than we're used to. You watch NASCAR, you got the Bowtie Brigade, you got the Ford guys, you got the Dodge isn't in NASCAR anymore, but Toyota, the Camry, whatever. But they're not, unless it's a factory team, like the Audi says Audi, but it's a factory team. The Porsches aren't necessarily factory teams. I'm sure they get some factory support, but it just has the team name. And if you look at a lot of the old, like if you're familiar with IndyCar here in the U.S., if you look at the old Indy cars, it was kind of the same thing. I believe it was Marmon Wasp that won the first Indy 500, and I think Marmon was a brand, but who the hell was Wasp? And that was like the engineer that put it together. It was kind of his own thing. The Chevrolets originally didn't run Chevrolets, they ran Front and X, and that was just like the name of their company or their team. So it's kind of an interesting change from what we're used to in the U.S. Usually, if you have a bow tie on your car, you get factory support, and you're part of the Chevy guys. But it's a little different here. And you saw here, the low fuel thing came up, and I thought I'd better pit, but then I realized, oh yeah, this is a 3-lap race, and even though I was about 18 seconds up, I didn't want to risk it. Could do a splash and go, but I didn't want to risk it. And the whole time I was kind of sweating bullets that I was going to run out of gas, and there was just enough, so I killed the suspense for you. But this is another place. I mean, you run out of gas at a big NASCAR track, and you're screwed. But can you imagine running out of gas on an 8.5-mile track? There's no way you're coasting around. And this whole time, I'm feathering the gas. I'm like, well, I didn't want it to run out. I mean, it's blinking at the very last pixel of red there. But I was really worried it was going to get a little too close for comfort. So let's talk about the other tracks just for a second. There is, of course, the Le Mans track, which we've been seeing and talking about. There's Suzuka East, Suzuka West, the Suzuka Grand Prix, which is the track from Pole Position 2, and those tracks are in numerous other games. Bugatti's here, Donington, Catalonia, a couple others I probably am not going to pronounce quite right, but there's enough variety to keep you entertained. There's a good solid variety. I mean, it's not Gran Turismo 5 by any stretch of the imagination, because this game came out in November of 2000. But there's enough to keep you busy. So real quickly, let's talk about the other versions of this game. There is a Game Boy Advanced version, which you can just pass on. There's a PlayStation version, which I have also played. You can pass on that too. The Dreamcast version is the better version. Now, in March of 2000, about 6 months ahead of this, a PC version did come out. That's what I had back in the day. I didn't have the Dreamcast version, I had the PC version, which looks better, and there's a couple subtle differences, namely the soundtrack. But who's running Windows 98 these days? This is the version that makes sense to buy, especially if you're collecting for the Dreamcast, especially if you like racing. Get Test Drive Le Mans. Early next week, Raquel will be back with a review of 102 Dalmatians, Puppies to the Rescue, and later in the week, I'll be back with a review of Iron Aces. Both games are for the Dreamcast. Sit, Dick, sit. Good cat.